The old bicycle bell, a friendly, melodic ding-ding, was the only sound that dared break the morning quiet of Hashizora village. Hiro Tanaka, barely 18, pedaled along the winding paths, his postman's uniform crisp, his bag surprisingly light. Most days, it was just a few bills, a flyer for the local market, or the occasional birthday card from a distant relative. Hashizora, nestled deep in the mountains of rural Japan, was a place where information traveled slowly, and hearts, sometimes, even slower. But Hiro wasn't just any postman. He was Hashizora's quiet keeper of unspoken words. He didn't know precisely when it started. Perhaps it was the day he found a faded, unsent letter tucked beneath the loose floorboard in Mrs. Sato's abandoned tea house, a letter of apology from a childhood friend she'd fallen out with decades ago. He delivered it, not as official mail, but as if it had been waiting for its moment. Mrs. Sato, tear-eyed, had reached out to her friend, and a decades-old chasm had begun to close. Since then, Hiro had learned to listen, not with his ears, but with something deeper, a sense that hummed with the quiet anxieties and lingering regrets of the village. He felt the whispers of unsent letters, not physical letters mailed through the system, but the words people held onto, the apologies never uttered, the affections never shown, the misunderstandings never clarified. They resided in forgotten corners, beneath old tatami mats, sometimes just a heavy feeling in the air around someone. And Hiro, somehow, knew where to find them and who needed to receive them. He never opened them. He just delivered them, a silent conduit for the heart. Today, the air felt particularly thick near the old community hall, a place usually bustling with activity, but now quiet, almost tense. Hiro sensed a familiar ache, a knot of unspoken words. He dismounted his bicycle, his gaze drifting towards a small, weather-beaten wooden shed behind the hall, a place where villagers sometimes stored old festival decorations. He pushed open the creaking door. Dust motes danced in the sliver of sunlight, illuminating forgotten banners and moth-eaten lanterns. Tucked away on a high shelf, beneath a forgotten bamboo flute, was a small, crudely folded piece of paper. It looked more like a child's drawing than a letter. He reached for it, his fingers tingling with the familiar warmth of an unsent. The recipient, he knew instantly, was old Grandpa Keo, the gruff but kind carpenter who lived by the river. The sender, he intuited, was Takeo's late wife, who had passed many years ago. Hiro didn't read the words, but he felt the sentiment, a plea for understanding, a hidden strength. He carefully placed the paper in his bag, a ghost letter among the mundane. Later that afternoon, he found Takeo-san whittling on his porch, a pipe clenched between his teeth. "Takeo-san," Hiro said, his voice soft, "I found this at the community hall. It seems to have been waiting for you." Takeo-san squinted, his gnarled hand reaching for the paper. As he unfolded it, his eyes, usually sharp and critical, softened. It was a simple drawing of a bird, and scribbled in a shaky hand at the bottom. "Don't forget to sing, my love, even when the nest is empty." Takeo had always blamed himself for not building a larger, stronger house before his wife fell ill. This small, unsent note, a simple drawing from a past life, reminded him that his wife cherished his spirit, not his perceived failures. A single tear traced a path down his weathered cheek. "Thank you, Hiro," he rasped, his voice thick. "It's been a long time." Hiro merely bowed, a quiet satisfaction blossoming in his chest. Another whisper heard. The village of Hashizora, despite its beauty, held its own share of quiet fractures. Among them was the strained relationship between the sisters, Ayaka and Orika. Ayaka, Hiro's peer, was known for a shy demeanor and her incredible talent for sketching the delicate plum blossoms and the stoic mountains. Orika, her older sister, was sharper, more pragmatic, running their family small pottery studio with a brisk efficiency that sometimes felt cold. There was an invisible wall between them, built brick by brick with unspoken words and old assumptions. Hiro had long felt a persistent hum of unsent emotions around their house. He knew it revolved around their late mother, who had suffered from a long illness before passing. One breezy afternoon, as he delivered a package to the pottery studio, he noticed Eureka hunched over a spinning wheel, her brow furrowed in concentration. Ayaka was at another table, meticulously applying glaze to a newly fired bowl, her movements precise but joyless. The silence between them was heavy. Later that week, while helping Ayaka's elderly art teacher clear out an old storage closet, Hiro felt the familiar pull. Tucked between forgotten canvases and dried paintbrushes, he found a small, leather-bound journal. It was Ayaka's, filled with her early sketches. But on the last page, there was a pencil drawing of their mother's favorite teacup, and a note, never torn out, never sent. Mom, I try to be strong like Eureka, but sometimes it just feels like I'm breaking. Eureka says I'm too sensitive, but you always understood my feelings. I miss you. I miss feeling understood. Hiro knew this was meant, in a way, for Eureka. It wasn't an accusation, but a vulnerable confession of a younger sister trying to find her place. He didn't deliver the entire journal. Instead, he carefully, almost magically, found a way to leave a folded copy of just that page on Eureka's workbench the next morning, amidst her tools. Eureka found it as she began her day. Her gaze, usually so focused, softened as she read the words. She recognized the drawing, their mother's teacup. She remembered Ayaka trying to draw it, struggling with the curve of the handle. She remembered telling Ayaka to be stronger, to not be so sensitive. Years ago, when their mother was fading, a tremor went through her. She hadn't realized how deeply her words had wounded Ayaka, or how much her sister had yearned for their mother's specific understanding. That evening, as Hiro passed their house, he saw Eureka not in the studio, but in the garden, speaking quietly with Ayaka. There was no grand embrace, no loud apologies, just a softer tone in Eureka's voice, a tentative nod from Ayaka. The wall wasn't gone, but a small window had been opened. The whispers in Hashizora were not always about pain. Sometimes they were about forgotten joy, about love that simply needed to be remembered. Hiro soon felt another strong pull, this time from Eureka herself. It was a different kind of unsent message, one layered with responsibility and a quiet burden. He found it in their old family home, in the attic, nestled inside a dusty box of their father's belongings, a small, beautifully crafted wooden bird, a miniature of the one Ayaka had drawn for Takeo-san. Attached to it was a faded photograph of Eureka as a young girl, shyly holding out a similar bird to her father. On the back, in their father's strong hand, were words Eureka had certainly never seen. My Eureka, you worry so much about doing things perfectly, just like your mother. But your greatest strength is your kind heart. Never forget that. And never stop making things with your hands, for they hold so much love. Their father had left Hashizora shortly after their mother's passing, unable to cope with his grief, seeking solace in a distant city. Eureka had taken on the mantle of responsibility, believing her father had left because she wasn't strong enough, or good enough, to hold the family together. The unsent words, waiting patiently for years, told a different story. Hiro knew he couldn't deliver this to their father, who rarely returned, but he could deliver it to Eureka, to help her understand her own past, her own heart. He wrapped the wooden bird and the photograph in brown paper and left it on Eureka's pillow, unsigned and mysterious. The next morning, Eureka sought Hiro out, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and wonder. "Hiro-kun," she began, holding up the package. "Where did this come from, and how did you know?" Hiro simply offered a small, knowing smile. "Sometimes, the wind carries messages we forget to send ourselves, Eureka-san. They just need a quiet place to land." Eureka looked down at the wooden bird, cradling it in her palm. He always said I worried too much." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I thought he meant I was a burden." "He saw your strength, Eureka-san," Hiro gently corrected. "He saw your love." The discovery brought a new depth to Eureka. She revisited old memories, not with judgment, but with a newfound gentleness. She began to soften towards Ayaka, understanding that her sister's sensitivity was not a weakness, but a reflection of their mother's spirit. Their conversations grew longer, less strained, filled with shared memories and tentative hopes. As summer deepened, Hashizora prepared for its annual Oban festival, a time for honoring ancestors and celebrating community. This year, however, a shadow lingered. A long-standing dispute between two prominent families, the Kurosawas and the Watanabes, over ancient land boundaries, had cast a pall over the village. The whispers around the festival preparation were not just excitement, but a deep-seated longing for resolution. Hiro felt a vast, encompassing, unsent message, not from one person, but from the very heart of the village. It was a forgotten communal story, a shared regret. He spent days cycling through old records, visiting the oldest villagers, listening intently not for specific words, but for feelings, for the gaps in stories. He learned that generations ago, the Kurosawas and Watanabes had been the closest of friends, pioneers who had built Hashizora together. They had planted the central cherry tree, the Sakura no Ki, that now stood majestically in the village square, its blossoms forming a delicate pink canopy each spring. The dispute, he discovered, had begun with a simple misunderstanding over a shared irrigation ditch, escalated by pride and grief after a harsh winter. The Sakura no Ki had been a symbol of their unity, but in their discord, its origin story had been forgotten or deliberately ignored. Hiro knew this wasn't a letter he could physically deliver. This unsent message needed to be felt by the entire village. He needed to help them rediscover their own forgotten story. He approached Ayaka and Eureka. Their bond was visibly stronger now, a quiet understanding passing between them. He shared his theory, his quiet conviction. The Sakura no Ki, he explained. It holds the first unsent words of Hashizora, words of friendship, of shared dreams. Inspired by Hiro's subtle guidance and their own recent reconciliation, Ayaka and Eureka decided to work together. Ayaka began sketching the magnificent cherry tree from every angle, capturing its ancient roots and sprawling branches. Eureka, meanwhile, crafted small, intricate clay reliefs of the tree, each one a unique miniature. They spoke to the elders, gathering fragments of the forgotten history. On the eve of the Oban festival, under a sky studded with nascent stars, the village gathered. The air was thick with anticipation, but also the familiar tension between the Kurosawas and Watanabes. Hiro stood quietly at the edge of the crowd, watching. Ayaka, usually shy, stepped forward, her voice soft but clear. She spoke of the Sakura no Ki, not as a tree, but as a living testament to the village's founding. Eureka joined in, holding up a small clay relief. She spoke of the shared effort, the spirit of unity that had planted the tree generations ago, a spirit stronger than any boundary. Ayaka then presented a large, beautiful watercolor of the tree, its roots intertwined, its branches reaching for the sky. This tree, Ayaka announced, was planted by the hands of the first Kurosawa and the first Watanabe. It is our village's heart. Its story is our story. A hush fell over the crowd. The elders nodded, tears in their eyes, recognizing the truth they had allowed to be buried. The heads of the Kurosawa and Watanabe families, who had stood stiffly apart, slowly turned to each other. In the gentle glow of the festival lanterns, a shared memory, long suppressed, began to surface. It wasn't about the land dispute anymore. It was about pride, about what they had lost. As the festival music began, soft and melodic, Hiro watched as the Kurosawa leader offered a hesitant hand to the Watanabe leader. A silent, knowing nod passed between them. The unsent words of generations, of shared history and forgotten friendship, had finally been delivered, not by a single letter, but by a rediscovered truth. The Oban festival that year was unlike any other. The laughter was lighter, the dances more spirited, the shared meals imbued with a newfound warmth. Ayaka and Eureka stood together, a quiet sense of accomplishment radiating from them. They had become not just sisters, but storytellers, helping to heal their village. Hiro Tanaka, the quiet postman, continued his rounds. He still carried the dwindling physical mail, but his true purpose, he knew, lay in the invisible messages. He understood that Hashizora wasn't just a collection of houses. It was a living, breathing entity, with a heart that pulsed with stories, regrets, and yearnings. His role was to tend to that heart, to ensure that no word of love, regret, or forgiveness remained eternally unheard. He saw Ayaka and Eureka now collaborating on a project for the community hall, their laughter echoing through the narrow streets. He saw Taro-san, whistling a tune as he carved, his eyes holding a renewed sparkle. The village felt lighter, the air clearer. The invisible threads that connected everyone strengthened and brightened. Hiro Tanaka pedaled on, the gentle ding-ding of his bicycle bell a constant, comforting rhythm in the quiet heart of Hashizora. He was just a postman, but he understood that sometimes the most powerful deliveries weren't in official envelopes, but in the brave, gentle act of letting unspoken words finally find their way home. And in that quiet, extraordinary work, Hiro found his own irreplaceable place, forever listening for the next whisper of an unsent word. That will be all for today. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button. Goodbye.